Wonderful. Thank you everyone for joining us tonight. I think we're probably going to go ahead and get started.
Yep. I'm just going to share my screen here.
Perfect. Thanks, Kate. On behalf of United Way Hastings and Prince Edward, I'd just like to thank you all for joining us this evening for this really important panel discussion hosted by Youth2Youth HPE. Just a couple of housekeeping items. I want everyone to know that this session is being recorded, and a link to the recording will be sent out to everyone who registered later this week. You'll notice that this is a webinar format, so only the panelists will be visible during the discussion. And we have a really full agenda tonight. So unfortunately, we won't be able to take questions from the audience, but if you have any follow-up or would like to touch base with us, we will be providing some contact information at the end of the evening. Recognizing that we're all joining from various parts of the community, I would like to start off this evening by sharing our land acknowledgement. We acknowledge and honor the fact that our service region is located on the territory of the Huron-Wendat, the Anishinaabe, the Haudenosaunee, and directly adjacent to the Tyendinaga territory, which is part of the Mohawk Nation. We are grateful for the opportunity to live and work here, and we are thankful for the generations of people who have taken care of this land for thousands of years. We also recognize the contributions of Métis, Inuit, and other Indigenous peoples who have and continue to live in these communities. United Way HPE is committed to acknowledging and appreciating the Indigenous people's historic connection to this land and to raise awareness of our Indigenous partners and communities. It's important to atone and rebuild. As a staff, we're also committed to learning more and to self-reflection. We want to recognize that this land acknowledgement is one small part of our journey. Moving forward, we are dedicated to listening to, learning from, and collaborating with Indigenous communities and partners. We're committed to weaving this learning into our policies and practices on an ongoing basis. Part of our role here at United Way HPE is to help create and help foster community capacity building. And we really want to do this through awareness creation and the building of empathy. We feel that youth are our future leaders, and we're really fortunate and feel it's incredible that they lead the change that they want to see in our community. So we're thrilled that the Youth2Youth program has spearheaded and is hosting this event tonight. And I want to turn things over to them and let them take us through this evening's discussion. So I'm going to introduce you to Caitlin Lalonde, our Youth2Youth coordinator. Caitlin?
Thank you, Jode. Hi, everybody. As Jody mentioned, I am Caitlin, and I'm going to just give you a brief overview of Youth2Youth. So Youth2Youth, HPE, is a youth-led group, and our mission is to spark innovative thinking, and we work in partnership with community leaders to help increase solutions to local problems, which have all been identified by youth. Youth2Youth HPE runs under the umbrella of United Way Hastings and Prince Edward and is best known for hosting 2 successful youth summits in our area, which engaged over 300 youth in conversations and solutions to issues that are important to them. These images you see on your screen represent some of the projects that youth have worked on. For one, they enabled free period products in some local public washrooms. You can look out for these in public washrooms like the Quinte Sports and Wellness Center. We are currently running a Giving Tuesday initiative to encourage philanthropy in high schools. And on the right, you'll see some of their mental health rocks, which will be placed in the community for people to find and help lift spirits. So on that, I would like to introduce some of our youth ambassadors who are joining us tonight. And I ask that they wave as I introduce and say their name. So we have Amanda, Gabby T, Gabby S, Miranda, and Jessica. Thank you so much for being here. Homelessness in our community has been an increasingly devastating crisis, and one that this pandemic has perpetuated even more. As our community finds ways to lessen these impacts, we want to connect people and talk about the issues surrounding this crisis. For National Housing Day, which is today, Youth2Youth HPE partnered with filmmaker Christy Farrell to bring her documentary, Us and Them, back to our community in hopes of generating community conversations on this topic and bringing more awareness. This film will be available for another 24 hours, so please watch it if you haven't, and feel free to share the link with any friends, family, and coworkers. You can find this link on our Facebook page and also United Way HPE's Facebook page. This panel discussion tonight brings together organizations who have experience with working in this field. You can see on your screen that we have individuals joining us from Addictions and Mental Health, John Howard Society, Enrichment Center for Mental Health, Youth Hub, and Children's Mental Health. And we will get more introduced to them here shortly. Tonight for our discussion, we will have a focus on how youth in our community are experiencing homelessness and the resources available while also discussing the crisis from the lens of everyone who experiences it. I would also like to just note that I had said that we are doing a Giving Tuesday initiative, and part of that is our BOGO sale. So on Tuesday, November 30th, we ask that you wear your United Way branded hats, which we are selling for $15. You can buy them as a gift to yourself, or they make a great stocking stuffer. And every hat that's purchased, Youth2Youth HPE will donate a hat or a pair of gloves to someone who needs it. You can find the order form by visiting United Way HPE, Giving Tuesday 2021, or the Youth2Youth HPE page. And I am going to stop sharing. So I am going to figure out my screen. Sorry, trying to navigate my. Okay, so I'm just going to explain format for tonight. Youth have prepared questions for our panelists based on the film's subject matter and all around the local perspective of homelessness, addictions, and mental health. Our ambassadors will also take turns letting us know how the film impacted them, and then pose a question to some of our panel members. This session, again, is being recorded and will be shared with anyone who registered for the event on Eventbrite. And also a reminder that it is webinar style, so all microphones and cameras of attendees will be turned off for the remainder of the evening. To start, we are going to have each panelist introduce themselves, their organization, and the work that they do. But before that, I would like to note that Christine Summers, who is a housing support worker with Youth Hub, was supposed to join the panel tonight, but is unfortunately off sick. However, she was so great to send her responses to us. And with her permission, we are going to read some of those tonight. So, on that note, I was hoping that Britt, you could start us off.
Sure. My name is Brittany Thompson, and I'm from the Enrichment Center for Mental Health at ECMH. I manage the financials and also assist in all the programming needs. So I work a little bit in each department, and those departments, our main services are counseling, employment, housing, and support groups. And we do service youth as well, even though it's not our primary population. And all of our services, there's no fee for them, and Aiden's going to talk specifically about our housing program.
Yeah, hi. So I'm Aiden. As Brittany said, our organization has plenty of services from counseling to programming, but I specifically work in the housing department. I'm a housing support worker, and with our organization, we offer opportunities to those in need of housing to stay in our housing for up to a year. But while they're working with our organization, they're expected to work towards goals, and will meet with us periodically to discuss what goals they've accomplished, what they're working towards, and how they plan on working towards more.
Daniel?
All right, good evening, everyone. So I'm Daniel Forsyth. I am one of the lead staff at the drop-in center that's currently occupying the gymnasium of Bridge Street United Church, just there on Bridge Street. And similar to Enrichment Center, like a lot of our clientele kind of skews towards middle age. We have a lot of overlap between us and the Grace Inn, so we serve a lot of the folks that stay there overnight, and then our services run from 8:30 a.m. to 7:30 p.m. But as on a larger scale, we at the John Howard, we also host the Belleville Youth Center and have various programs like Quantum and employment pathways and other things like that too. So there's a lot of overlap, and although they're less prevalent to the adults, but we do have some. Our age range kind of like bookends 16 and up. So we do catch some youth who unfortunately are in need of our services.
Thank you, Daniel. Christy?
Hi, so I'm Christy Farrell. I work at the Hastings Housing Resource Center, which is under the Youth Hub umbrella. My title is the Youth Intensive Case Manager. So I work with youth ages 16 to 24 that are homeless or at risk of homelessness due to a health or safety issue. I help them secure and maintain housing. Once the youth is housed, we work on other goals like education, employment, or anything else that they may be looking forward to. And that's it.
Perfect. Thank you, Christy. Valerie?
Hi, I'm Valerie Zhang from Addictions and Mental Health Services. We cover Hastings and Prince Edward counties, providing mental health case management, addiction services, a wider range of, we have court diversion program, opioid management program, lots of different things that we offer. I'm the program manager primarily with our housing program, which is I guess why I'm here tonight, and have been working in the field for over 20 years. So again, we serve 16 and up, so primarily an adult population, but there is that, the crossover with, say, Youth Hub or something like that, where, we do see some youth that come through our doors. And I think we recently have a youth addictions counselor that's working in partnership with Youth Hub. So some of the answers tonight, I was able to get her input in as well. So that was helpful.
That's great. Thank you.
I think that's it for me.
Thanks. We also have Warren joining us from Children's Mental Health, but I think that he might be having some technical difficulties. So we'll keep an eye out for him and we'll add him back when he's able to join. And so on that note, I'm going to start with Amanda, our youth ambassador, and she's going to tell us about how the film impacted her.
Thank you. Okay, so how it impacted me. So Us and Them was really refreshing and yet really heartbreaking at the same time. I would say my perspective on homelessness has changed. One of the things this documentary helped me see was there's a misconception that if you're homeless, you're not trying, whether that be trying not to get clean, trying not to get off the streets, not trying to find a job. People make assumptions about homeless people. They think that they know everything about a person just from one glance, but we don't know someone else's story. I've always tried to have the mindset where you never know what someone's going through, and then there's always things that people don't talk about, no matter how much you know them. And I think that that's something we definitely saw in Us and Them. I also, unfortunately, saw how dehumanizing it is for people who suffer from homelessness or mental health or addictions, and maybe both. They aren't just statistics or faceless people, that someone's mom, dad, brother, sister, grandma, grandpa, friend, whatever, it's somebody's loved one. I think people forget that that's a person. We don't know them. We don't know what they've been through, their challenges, their trauma. We have no idea about who they are. And I think with anything, we all have the potential to be pushed into their position, possibly be pushed onto the street. We all have trauma. We all have weaknesses. For example, with Donelda, she was a mother who raised her kids, and yet trauma pushed her into a lifestyle that she never wanted for herself and never expected for herself. And we always think that won't happen to me, but the reality is it could happen to anyone. And that was my biggest takeaway from the documentary, was it could happen to anyone.
Thank you for that thoughtful response, Amanda. Just before you ask your question, I see that Warren is back. So Warren, are you able to just introduce yourself and your organization and the work that you do?
Yes, yes. So my name is Warren Lardo. I'm a child and family therapist at Children's Mental Health Services. So our main purpose is to provide counseling for the parents and the children of Quinte and Prince Edward counties. So I think from our lens, we would probably be working with some of the older youth who are experiencing homelessness, and perhaps also the parents who are maybe couch surfing in between homes. But yes, sorry, my internet had cut out. So anyways.
That's okay. Thank you, Warren. And so now Amanda is going to ask the first question.
Okay, so my question is, how did the film make you feel, and how might it be similar or different to the experience of homelessness or mental health and addictions locally?
I can go ahead. I think what Jody said at the beginning, that the really important part is it made me feel really empathetic. And I think it really represented well that unfortunately, it's not just one barrier that you're having to work with someone on, it's multiple barriers, which makes it even more complicated. And I did really like that they brought in the healing wheel, and we're looking at it from all lenses, mental, emotional, physical, and spiritual, because I do really believe you have to look at all those aspects of the life. And I love that they brought in the trauma. And as you said, Amanda, every individual has trauma, and the way they can work through it was really displayed in the film and how it really does impact individual lives.
Thank you.
Hello. I was very emotional watching the film. I find it's very realistic. It's some of the people in the video reminded me of some of my clients that I've worked with through the past. So, and I think it is very similar to what we're experiencing here. I don't see what the differences would be at all.
I agree, Christy. I think when I was watching the film, it was unfortunate that it wasn't actually that surprising or shocking to me, and that's sad, right? After so many years of working in the field, it's you've heard a lot, you see a lot, and so yeah, watching the film, it was familiar. I think what I think a takeaway though for me, and I think for other people hopefully, is also it showed the ups and downs, and I think that's the real struggle with mental health and addictions, is that it's not you're struggling, you get help and everything's great. So I think it portrayed it really realistically, that it's full of ups and downs. And I think the idea of persevering and trying, and sometimes trying and trying, and so having people along the way that are supportive and help instill some hope I think that it showed how tremendously valuable that is. So I think that's, from my perspective as, you know, someone who's worked in the field, it's nice to know that you can make a difference, but also how important it is just even to a simple a smile or a kind gesture, and the difference that can make to someone, just to their lives. So I think that was really powerful too.
Yeah, I think my reaction to it was one of overwhelming sadness. And I don't know what it was about that. Like at the drop-in center, we see people who are, you know, almost bear a striking resemblance to a lot of the folks that were, you know, starred in the film. And I was my folks were over, and I was just kind of joking to my dad afterwards. You know, I'm just like, you know, I don't know what it is about that just made me so sad. You know, maybe and yet I deal with it every day. Maybe I have the benefit. I don't have, you know, sad music playing, or it's just, you know, while I'm at work, or it's not so, you know, condensed. But I think the part that really struck me was Gabor Mate's comment. I think when she started to realize that the medicine wheel wasn't the solution, in a sense, too, although it was a tool she approached with it. He just kind of commented, he's like, well, wouldn't it be nice if we just had this method that could solve homelessness, that could solve all the pain that these people are experiencing, and you could approach it in a structured way, and that would resolve it. And then to have the film resolve in a very realistic way, you know, a few of them perished, and you know, due to health complications of street life and the reality of addictions. But I think it was just a real soul opening moment to just remember that a lot of what we bring to the table is unconditional, you know, loving acceptance. And that is a really, it can be a very painful, and it can be a very vulnerable position to approach people who experience tremendous pain, because there you are, you know, you're required to be open to it and yet not overwhelmed by it, and to be able to sit there with folks and stuff too. And I think it was just a reminder of that. And but I think it ended on a hopeful note, you know, just this is what we're doing. We're present, and we're here, and we're offering them kindness that you know, they had been denied, and to devastating effect. So, but very sad. I'm still shaking it off. So.
Hayden or Warren, would you like to comment on that question?
Yeah, so I personally don't think that I could word it any better than anyone else has said it. But one thing that the film really helped me feel was the motivation to get up the next day, come to work, to do what my organization does, and is to help those in need. So just to watch that and to see how fragile people can be out in the elements and just out on the street, it's just, yeah, it really helps give you that get up and go in the morning to get to work and, you know, hopefully change some lives.
Thank you. I am going to move on to Gabby S. And she's also going to talk about how the film impacted her and then ask her question.
For me, I was like, before watching it, I'm like, oh, I'm gonna need breaks and whatnot. But as I was watching it, I'm like, you know what? I don't need a break. I want to know what happens. So like before watching, like I knew people like who were experiencing homelessness, had a life before being on the streets. And like there are some factors, so like drugs or even just childhood trauma can get them on the streets. I can see that it's easy to feel like nobody cares for the people who are experiencing homeless, so they just give up on themselves, which is super sad. It was also shocking to hear that shelters won't let people who are experiencing homelessness, if they're having a psychotic episode due to like trauma or just involvement of drugs. I understand that the shelter they do not take people who aren't ready to change, and I understand that's important for individuals to want to get better, but I still found it to see some participants being left out of the shelter. Like Brittany said, I liked seeing like the sacred medicine wheel being used. And I did not know that Indigenous people actually use that to overcome like addictions and drugs. And then I liked seeing how each of the individuals changing over time throughout the film, whether it was good or bad. And then seeing them holding themselves accountable, like wanting to change, and even if they've like taken a step down because they've say accidentally used drugs or accidentally decided to go back to drinking, it was nice to see that they held themselves accountable. And then lastly, I felt like that sense of like happiness to see them like showing emotion when giving them a room so they're out of the extreme weather. So that's how kind of impactful it was for me. And then my question is to Christy, Daniel, and Christine. So what is the housing experience like for youth in our community? What does homelessness look like for youth locally? So any definitions of what homelessness is and isn't, common misconceptions or things people might not be aware of.
I can go first. So we classify anyone that's homeless that is basically they don't have a place they're paying rent. It's safe for them to be there. So it could be on the streets, it could be crashing on someone's couch, sleeping in a car, anything like that would be considered homeless or in a shelter. So I would say youth have lots of barriers to housing. Even adults do. It's hard for adults right now to find housing in this market. But being a youth is even worse because they don't have any rental experience. They don't have any references. They have no credit or poor credit. A lot of youth are struggling with mental health issues, addictions issues, low income. And I say naive, but not trying to put them down, but they just don't have knowledge of the rental market. So someone that's on Ontario Works may want to rent an apartment, which would be ideal for anyone to be able to afford their own apartment. But in this market, with Ontario Works income, it's just not going to happen. They're going to be looking at a room rental. And then there's struggles with that. They're renting with other people, you're living with other people, which is a struggle for anyone. So a lot of youth will, find temporary housing and it falls through, and then they're looking for something else again and again. And it's just a cycle. Yeah, I think that's it for that. And no family supports often too leads to youth becoming homeless because they've burned all those bridges.
I'd love to hear what Christine had to say if she offered her written response. Yeah.
She did. Yeah, I can read that. So this is from Christine Summers, who's a housing support worker through Youth Hub Quinte, and she works directly with the team from CAS. And they refer youth that are age 16 or 17 to her. So she writes, the housing experience for youth that I work with can be scary for them once they find out there's no housing out there within their budget. Not only that, but most people will not rent to youth due to the age and immaturity, potentially a sense of irresponsibility. Landlords also want to know the reasons why they're not at home, and that can create an issue as I'm not able to share anything due to confidentiality. My clients usually have financial support from the government, and the amount that's given them is not enough to rent a room anymore. People are charging really high amounts because of the demand for housing. And on top of that, it can be required to have a trustee in order to obtain this financial support. So youth that don't have any family supports are now needing to find an adult to be their trustee in order to get financial support to find housing. There are some great program models in the neighboring communities to pull from that potentially we could look at here. And Northumberland County has a great program called Rebound Child and Youth Services. That service takes away the stress that is added to the youth and allows them to focus on where they can find housing. Some misconceptions. Most individuals that I have met have a belief that any youth who is out on their own must be because they just didn't want to follow the rules at home or in the place that they were living. Now, there could be a few of those cases, but I can tell you that the youth I have worked with come from real home struggles and would love nothing better than to have a stable and safe home to live in. It can also be difficult because there's not many places for youth under the age of 18. The shelter system requires youth to be 18 years of age or older. If a youth has a worker attached to them and they don't have anywhere to stay, the worker will help them find short term. And more often than not, that can be something like a motel.
Yeah. And so I'm kind of cheating by skipping to the end and just kind of like, well, what are the misconceptions out there, and how does that lead to stigmatization? Well, that it just banks off, like, you know, they don't have a lot of landlords and potential people who are going to rent to them don't have a lot of generous assumptions on just, like, you know, who they are as people. I like to think there aren't really any pull factors to street life. Like, there's the assumption that they didn't want to follow the rules, so they were rebellious, so therefore, you know, they're going to cause nothing but trouble for me because this is who they are at their core. They're not somebody who can be responsible. They're not somebody who, you know, I can ultimately trust with my property, right? But I really only like to think of things, there are those push factors. You know, there are more often than not at the drop-in center, we see a lot of untreated psychosis, and sometimes they don't come from particularly broken homes, but sometimes, like, you know, the parents just aren't equipped to manage that. Maybe that caused a lot of conflicts. You don't know. Maybe, you know, substance use was a coping mechanism. Let's say the home was broken. But then do you go to blame the parents? Because, like, if you go and see, maybe there's generational brokenness. So then, you know, whose fault is that? But I think we do youth who are experiencing homelessness, and I think we have done that on a really large scale that has seriously blocked them from getting adequate housing, by making these assumptions that somehow the allure of street life, the allure of substance use appealed to some, you know, deviant nature within them. And these are, you know, untrustworthy, you know, ugly or dangerous people when really they're just kids who were up against tremendous, confusing, terrifying, I'm speaking like maybe even, you know, their own mental health in their minds, or, you know, the physical and emotional physically and emotionally dangerous home environment that push them towards this. And that can be generational, or that can be, you know, a unique case, but either way, a lot of those barriers are rooted in those conceptions, which are further compounded by the housing market, I think, which has been well stated.
Thank you so much. I am going to move on to the next question, which is for Britt, Aiden, and Valerie. What is the experience of youth mental health and addictions locally? Any definitions of what it is and isn't, common misconceptions, or things that people might not be aware of?
I think we've kind of touched on the topic, but I just wanted to bring up a little bit of a misconception, I think, is sometimes like at the enrichment center, we have individuals that may be homeless and, as Daniel was speaking out, very sick with mental health. And I think finding the right door for them is really important, and finding the place that can get them the help that they need. Because unfortunately at ECMH, we aren't a clinical base and can't provide always that intense mental health support. So I think that just adds on an additional barrier with trying to get them housed is, are they healthy enough and mentally safe enough to be, you know, in one of our housing units or another one. So I think that's a misconception, is, you know, trying to get people service can be really hard. And even us trying to connect clients to the right place can be difficult. But I think luckily we have lots of great community partners here. So we do work together.
Another thing that I've noticed in the homeless youth community locally is a huge lack and unaccess to proper education, because a lot of them have found themselves in a state of homelessness before either completing whatever education they were in. Say they were in grade 12 and left before getting their diploma, or maybe they want to move on to college or university, but they just don't have the means of accessing that sort of thing.
I'm just going to read the answer that was provided by my staff member. She said, there's so much more awareness and information being provided to youth at such a young age. So this has opened up the door for youth to feel more comfortable talking about mental health issues and reaching out for help. We have noticed an increase in access to some services, but sometimes there's a wait list for other services. So a youth might be able to consult with a psychiatrist, but then have to wait for the counseling depending on the demand at the time. So this can leave the youth with a diagnosis, but no support to process, understand, and to learn coping strategies to manage symptoms. So I think the increased awareness has obviously, you know, I'm hoping that we're starting to work on the stigma issue of mental health and addictions. And I think what she's indicated is the greatest misconception is the ambivalence to create change amongst youth. So most of the youth we work with do want to create some change in their substance use and are very open to try new strategies to cope with mental health that might be leading to substance use. So as a whole, youth are very open-minded to the process of getting help. So I think that's a positive, but then it can also create an increased demand for services. And as we know, there's with an increased demand, then there's more wait times. So it can be hard to, you know, for people who need to access the services in a timely fashion sometimes.
Great, thank you. It's a good perspective. Kevin T, I'll ask you to read your question.
Yes, hello. My question is for Valerie, Christy, and Warren. How has the pandemic impacted the housing situation for youth locally, and how has it impacted youth mental health and addictions?
So I think some of the barriers were already mentioned in terms of just right now the housing market is horrendous for anyone. So I can imagine it would be so much more difficult for youth who don't have maybe the references, don't have the rental history, the finances to, be able to even afford what is out there. So I think the pandemic has really created an issue in terms of youth being able to connect. So having fewer safe places, supportive places maybe to go. So they find themselves more in high risk situations. And for vulnerable youth, so sometimes virtual support hasn't been accessible. And then there's also the boredom issue of the pandemic, which I think is, again, across the board has affected people. And when people are bored, substance use and negative thinking, which can feed into substance use and anxiety and depression and things like that. So the pandemic has been really detrimental in terms of people's mental health, and has definitely spiked, substance use across the board. So I don't have particular stats on age populations, but I can imagine that that's been a very difficult for anyone who's working with the youth. It's probably been a really difficult time the past couple of years.
Yeah, Gabby. In terms of our referrals, we have seen an increase in teenagers accessing our services if they're experiencing anxiety and depression and probably some isolation. One of the things that did go well was that there was an increase in accessing the services because we decided to provide our counseling services virtually. So there was some good effects of the COVID pandemic, but for the most part, it's been difficult for us to serve everybody. But there are some technological barriers that some of the youth that we service just don't have internet, or perhaps they don't have a laptop. So we're trying to accommodate those. We've sent some laptops to some people. But in general, it's hard for us at Children's Mental Health Services to really work directly with youth experiencing homelessness. We would probably be working to stabilize them first in terms of like finding the appropriate housing before they can even do something more difficult like therapy for a long time. But yes, I think the pandemic has probably impacted the youth in our county pretty bad, especially for the ones who are living maybe all the way up north in Bancroft and like smaller towns. We've seen a lot of people experiencing sort of just the loneliness and wanting to speak to a therapist.
A lot of the same things. My program does cover all of Hastings County, and it was a very hands-on program. I would travel to do an intake with anyone. It was always face-to-face. I found with doing phone intakes that you're not building a relationship or rapport with the client, so you're losing contact a lot. When you're giving them a call, you're just a number, you're not a face anymore, so it's easier for them, if they're having anxiety about the situation, for them just not to answer the phone. I used to take clients to viewings, so I was able to attend with them. And with the COVID regulations, I wasn't able to do that anymore. I would set up the viewings and just hope they were able to make it there on their own. Also, a lot of landlords prefer to rent to students. And with the students doing virtual learning, they weren't going to school all day. So landlords didn't want to rent to them. Also, there was a lot of family conflict with youth and parents because everyone was at home. So during the lockdowns, I was getting a lot of parents calling me frustrated about the whole situation, and they just wanted, the youth out of the home so they didn't wreck their relationship any further. So that was a huge issue too. Also, anyone who was in any sort of program out of the area, they weren't able to have transportation to go to viewing. So sometimes I'd have to try to arrange a landlord to rent to someone and they would be meeting them on their move-in day. So it's very, very difficult in those situations. Yeah.
Thank you. Jessica, could you please share how the film impacted you?
Yeah, the film was very overwhelming to watch, and so I wasn't able to watch it all in one sitting. But before I watched the film, I don't really truly think that I understood homelessness as a whole. I thought that a person experiencing homelessness was mostly due to drugs or decisions that they had made previously in their lives. And I think that that was the biggest takeaway for me, was that I found that people who are experiencing homelessness resort to experiences that they had during their younger years. And I think that we judge a lot of people based on like how they look or what we think that their experiences have been. And so that was the biggest thing I think for me with the film. My questions for David and Christy. What are the available resources for youth looking for homeless or housing or needing shelter locally?
Sorry, Jess, that was my mistake. That's Daniel and Christy. Sorry, Jess, that was me.
Oh, I'm so sorry. That was my bad.
Okay, I'm
Sorry.
honestly too polite to correct, so that's that's my fault.
Okay, so I'll say some that I'm aware of at the moment. So there is Grace Inn for anyone who's 18 or older. And of course, the Enrichment Center, the Transitional Housing Program. Anyone who is with CAS, CAS may be able to put them in a motel room. There's also the emergency after hours number. So depending on their age and the situation, they may be offered a motel stay, but if they are under 18, a motel stay isn't an option for them. They would be offered transportation to a youth shelter out of the area because we don't have one here. Youth Hub also has transitional housing program and a co-op housing program. And I'm also a support in the area for any youth that's homeless, and I can try to help point them in the right direction.
Did Christine have any input in writing that could be read out?
Not for this one.
Sorry, what was that?
No, sorry, not for this one.
Oh, okay. All right. Well, I'm on the spot. All right. Well, I was kind of talking it over with our colleagues. I think Christy did a really great job summarizing a lot of the supports that were out there. So I'll just kind of speak to what I know. One major barrier that we have noticed as well too, or at least what we find that frequent our drop-in, and our drop-in is a place that's available for 16 and up. So we're open from 8:30 in the morning to 7:30 at night, which I think will be increasingly important as the winter months progress. Just somewhere warm to be. We do showers, we do laundry. We serve breakfast and coffee in the mornings. We do coffee all day, with the exception over the lunch hour. which Bridge to United has a long-standing meal program there as well. We also have Wi-Fi, phone, and things like court support too. Some of the youth that we see have kind of, I don't want to generalize, but have records which have posed significant barriers to just about anything imaginable. It's the same with adults too, right? Because there's that stamp there, regardless if you have pending criminal charges, regardless if they're, you know, what you could call crimes of poverty, which are maybe given your background, you have poor emotional regulation, and you're in a high stress, high conflict environment, and you have what would otherwise be, you know, very human moment. You know, maybe someone decided to press charges, maybe you took out your anger in a public way, and now you have, you know, a mischief under 5,000 charge, or somebody stole your bike and you stole it back, and you know, and then you have all these kinds of barriers anyways. So what I mean to say is we at the John Howard Society, we also offer court outreach, and we help you know, youth and young adults who are trying to make sense of the court process, you know, applying for the disclosure. Do I qualify for legal aid? You know, how do I go through with this, and how do I cope, and how do I move forward with these charges? So so we do have that to offer, and I think that's what I can speak to, certainly out of my own experience.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Finally, I'm going to turn it to Miranda to ask her question.
Hi, I'd like to ask Brittany, Eden, Valerie, and Warren, what are the available resources for youth looking for mental health or addiction support locally?
So I can speak to ECMH specifically, and there's some other organizations here that can speak to their services. So at Enrichment Center, we offer 4 kind of core things. So as I talked about, we offer counseling. There's no fee for this service, and it's self-referral. So if anyone is interested, you can phone tomorrow, and we do have a short wait list. We've been able to get through that pretty quick. We also offer employment support. So if mental health is a barrier for you, we can work specifically with you on to help you find a job that would be accommodating and understanding to your mental health needs. We also offer a variety of support groups that, again, there's no fee for them. We offer anxiety and depression, anger management, healthy masculinity, managing powerful emotions, safe talk, so many more other groups. And as well as we talked about, we do have 3 transitional homes in the area. We have them specifically for females, males, and seniors, and we also do support other programs that we have for housing, as they talked about, after hours program. So that's generally kind of what we do. And if anyone is always interested, check out our website or give us a phone call. And as I said, all of our services, there's no fee, and it is self-referral, which is great because it reduces that barrier to getting access.
Great question, Miranda. Speaking for Children's Mental Health Services, just like ETMH, we provide a whole host of therapy services. We provide individual counseling, we provide family therapy, we also provide group therapy. We have a live-in residence that is usually reserved for our high needs clients who usually are being discharged from the psychiatric units, either from Kingston or another hospital. You should know that Children's Mental Health Services provides therapy every day, virtually at this time. So without an appointment required. So if you're feeling, or someone you know is not feeling very well that day, they could call in just our main number, and they could speak to a therapist probably within, on the same day, or probably the following day. Our services have no fees. We're provincially funded. So yes, we're very open. You do have to be 17 and under. If you're coming with a parent, you have to be 12 and over to consent for yourself. If you're bringing along somebody like 11 years old and younger, you might need to bring a parent with you or another caregiver who could consent for you. But otherwise, we're available and we're providing in-person and virtual services as long as you're in somewhere in Quinte and Hastings and Prince Edward County.
In terms of addictions and mental health services, we, like I mentioned, we offer mental health case management services, addictions counseling. We do have an opioid management program, community withdrawal management program. We have also a problem gambling program, which I think has also kind of included gaming under that umbrella, because I think that's become an issue, especially with the younger population. So I just thought to throw that out there as well. I think it's important to note there are a lot of resources online, and I think that is really that might speak to youth really well, who tend to be kind of tech savvy. So you know, looking at even just for information about maybe a diagnosis or kind of what you're feeling. So there's the Center for Addictions and Mental Health, which has a lot of great tip sheets. But there's also Breaking Free Online, which is an online support, so 24/7 for people 16 and older. And there's also an app that goes with that. So it I think is really good to be able to do things, you know, if you in conjunction with maybe if you're getting more formal support, also to be able to have some online things that can access as well. So in terms of referrals to our agency, you can self-referral on our website, but also the 310 Open will take central intake is for mental health and addiction referrals in the county. So that's also one number to call to access some of the services that are on the panel today.
I also wanted to mention that Youth Hub has many mental health counselors available as well for free, and it's for ages 16 to 24. And services are offered virtually or in person right now.
Amazing, thank you so much. Just being aware of time, I just want to make sure that to see if anybody has any final thoughts that they would like to share before I close out. Okay, share my screen again. So it's good timing. That concludes our National Housing Day panel discussion. I would just like to thank all of our panelists for taking the time to join tonight and for their thoughtful responses. Thank you for the work that you do. I would also like to thank our ambassadors for creating and taking lead on this important initiative. Again, anyone who is registered will receive the recording of this discussion, and the screening of Us and Them is available until tomorrow at midnight. So please share with anyone you think should see it. And if you would like to join Youth2Youth and work on a youth project, you can connect with me at that email or call me at that phone number. And thank you all for tuning in and listening. I appreciate it. A great evening.
Thank you again. Have a
Thank you,
good night.
Caitlin.
Thank you.
Thank you for hosting, and thank you to our ambassadors.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a great night, everyone. Stay warm out there.
Thanks, Aiden. Have a good night.
Bye.